What if I told you that a woman in her 70s cleared her entire home in just 2 days and smiled at the end? Sounds impossible, right? Especially when every drawer hides a memory, every shelf holds a piece of who we once were. But this video isn't about throwing things away, it's about reclaiming peace, about finally letting go of the things that weigh us down without losing what matters. Today, I'll walk you through 7 ruthless decluttering tricks that have helped seniors just like you clear out entire homes in 48 hours. Not by rushing, but by choosing what truly deserves to stay. These are not your typical tips. They go deeper, sharper, kinder. And yes, anyone can do them, even if you feel overwhelmed or tired. Let me tell you about Margot. She's 68, lives alone in a 2-bedroom house in Pennsylvania. After her sister passed, Margot kept every greeting card they ever exchanged, stuffed in shoeboxes under the bed. She hadn't read them in years, but couldn't throw them out either. One evening, she sat down with a cup of chamomile tea, lit her sister's favorite vanilla candle, and began reading each one aloud. Then, she picked 5 that truly spoke to her heart and donated the rest to a church art program that made bookmarks for hospice patients. She said that night, she finally felt like her sister's love was with her, not in the box, but in her breath. And that's where real decluttering begins. Let me show you how she did it, starting with the first trick. It's bold, it's fast, and it might just change the way you look at every item in your home. Isn't it strange how we stop noticing the place we walk through every single day? That little table by the front door piled high with unopened mail, expired coupons from Walgreens, and maybe a key you haven't used since Bush was president. This is where your home says hello. It deserves to feel like an invitation, not a warning sign. One woman I spoke with, Esther from Ohio, told me her entryway had become her anxiety zone. Boots from winters long past, reusable grocery bags she kept meaning to organize, and a dish of random buttons. She took just 20 minutes one Sunday morning. She tossed the junk mail, folded 2 bags into a drawer, and added a tiny vase of silk tulips from the church sale. Now, when she comes home, she says it feels like the house is smiling at her. I remember when I reset my own front door. I found an old photograph of my kids in Halloween costumes tucked between phone bills. I hadn't seen it in years. That picture didn't belong in a pile. It belonged in a frame. Funny how letting go of clutter makes space for what actually matters to rise up. Because sometimes the hardest part of starting isn't the stuff inside. It's that we no longer recognize our own welcome. A peaceful doorway is a gentle promise that the rest of the house can follow. Once the entrance feels lighter, your shoulders drop a little. You breathe differently. And that's where the real momentum begins. Now let's step just a little further in. There's something important waiting in the next room. You know that moment when you pick something up, a scarf, a candle, an old hairbrush, and your mind goes blank? Suddenly, it's not just a thing. It's a memory, a question, a tug of war inside your chest. That's not decluttering. That's emotional combat. But here's the shift. What if you didn't decide in the moment? What if the decision was already made before you even opened it in the drawer? Pre-deciding means setting simple, loving rules ahead of time. I only keep 5 mugs. 1 drawer of scarves. If it hasn't been used since 2020, it goes. These aren't cold rules, they're kind boundaries that protect your energy. A woman named Joanne from Tampa shared how she emptied her kitchen by deciding, before she began, that she would keep 1 mixing bowl, 1 muffin pan, and 1 teapot. That was it. When she opened each cabinet, she didn't debate or argue with herself. She just followed the plan she made on a calm day. The rest went to Goodwill, including 7 casserole dishes and a bundt pan she'd used once at a church bake-off in 1992. I did something similar last winter. I'd held on to jackets that didn't fit my body or my life anymore. So I decided 3 jackets max. Not the warmest, not the most expensive, just the 3 I actually reached for. And the rest? I thanked them, folded them neatly, and donated them at the AARP Community Center. Funny. I haven't missed a single one. Sometimes we stall because we think every item needs a case-by-case trial. But what we really need is permission to let go without having to suffer over each goodbye. When you make the decision ahead of time, the act of letting go becomes an act of peace, not pain. And once your decisions are already in place, the next space becomes easier. There's one room in particular where this works like magic. Let's go there next. Some mornings, even standing too long at the sink can feel like climbing a hill. You look at the closet or that hallway cabinet and think, where do I even begin? And that's the thing. Maybe we've been told the wrong way to begin. Forget the big plastic bins, the heavy-duty boxes. What if all you needed was a chair? Not to sit things on, but to sit yourself on. Place a sturdy chair right in the middle of the space you want to clear. Sit, breathe, and look around. Don't rush. Let your eyes settle on what catches your heart, not just your hand. Pick one small item. Decide. Then another. Slowly, softly, with kindness. Dorothy, a retired nurse from Michigan, told me she cleared her entire hall closet this way. She placed her late husband's old recliner across from the closet door, sat with a cup of chamomile tea, and just observed. One pair of mittens reminded her of their last snowy walk. She kept them. A pile of tangled scarves she hadn't worn since 2009? Donated to the church sale. That chair turned what used to feel like a battle into a gentle ritual. I remember using this myself the week after my sister passed. I was helping clean her sewing room. My instinct was to dive in, sort quickly, but something in me said sit. So I brought in a chair, sat for 10 minutes, and just listened to the space. It changed everything. I wasn't attacking the clutter. I was honoring the life that had filled it. There's a quiet power in pausing, in sitting with what's been before deciding what stays. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is simply sit with it. And once you've created that stillness, you may be surprised what surfaces. The next tip takes that calm energy and channels it into something powerfully motivating. Just wait until you hear it. Sometimes we walk into a room and it just feels heavy, not from the stuff exactly, but from the confusion. Is this the guest room, the craft room, or the storage closet where memories go to get dusty? When a space doesn't have a purpose, it slowly loses its soul. That's why this next step is so powerful. Before you move a single thing, give the room a name. Not a label like office or laundry, but a name that speaks to how you want to feel in it. My morning peace room. The reading nook. Sunday soup kitchen. Once a space has a name that holds intention, your decisions become beautifully simple. Does this item belong in the life I want to live here? I once visited a neighbor, Carol, who had turned her dining room into what she lovingly called the memory gallery. Not with clutter, no. She chose 10 meaningful photos, framed them, and let go of 3 boxes of dusty centerpieces and old serving trays. No one comes over for pot roast anymore, she told me. But I sit here every morning with coffee and remember. And the space felt alive because it had a name, a job, a spirit. I did this too after my wife passed. The room we'd shared our meals in became quiet, almost cold. One afternoon I whispered to myself, "This is now my letters room." I brought in my old writing desk, a stack of cards I never sent, and let the casserole dishes go to Goodwill. Funny thing is, I started writing again. Not books, just letters. To old friends. To her. That room helped me heal because it finally had a reason to stay open. We don't need more rooms. We need rooms that make us feel like ourselves again. When a room has a name, it remembers what it's for, and so do we. And once your space has purpose, the next step becomes clear. Because now we can stop organizing stuff boutique and start organizing energy. Let me show you how. Some things sit in our homes not because we use them, just because we've had them too long to imagine them anywhere else. A wool coat that still smells faintly of cedar. A pair of cake pans from your daughter's 12th birthday. A rocking chair no one has rocked in years. These objects aren't wrong, but maybe they're ready for someone else's story now. That shift in thinking from why should I let this go to who might need this more can be the key to letting go without grief. Here's the simple truth. Imagining the next owner helps us move from attachment to generosity, and not the kind of generosity that says, here, take my old stuff, but the kind that whispers, maybe this thing still has a life ahead, even if not with me. Take Barbara from Cincinnati. She held onto her sewing machine for 20 years after her arthritis made it too painful to use. It sat untouched, tucked in a corner, gathering more guilt than dust. But one day she donated it to a church group that taught single moms to sew baby blankets and earn side income. That same machine now helps make gifts for newborns and grocery money for women starting over. I thought giving it away would hurt, she told me later, but I felt lighter, like I'd passed on more than just a machine. I'd passed on a little bit of hope. I remember something similar myself. Years ago, I gave my grandfather's pipe collection to a young artist who turned them into wind chimes and sculpture. At first, it felt wrong, like I was betraying something. But when she sent me a photo of one pipe hanging beside wildflowers on her porch, I realized it wasn't an ending. It was transformation. You don't need a dramatic gesture to feel that. Sometimes it's just one small act. One casserole dish to a newlywed neighbor, one warm coat to a shelter, one book to a library sale, tucked with a note. This helped me once. I hope it helps you too. Even everyday things carry meaning, and meaning multiplies when shared. You see, what we often fear when we declutter isn't really about stuff. It's about what that stuff says about us, who we were, what we valued, what we still long for. But passing things on doesn't erase that story. It honors it and lets it continue in someone else's hands. There's a term for this I heard once, living legacy. Not the kind you write in a will, the kind you give quietly while you're still here to smile about it. And when you imagine the next owner, really picture them, you're not discarding, you're gifting. One woman in our wise community gave her late husband's fishing gear to a teen from her church who just lost his dad. She wrapped each item with a memory. This reel caught our first trout in Oregon. This hat kept the mosquitoes away mostly. That boy now fishes every Saturday and brings her a photo each time. Letting go isn't loss when it becomes someone else's beginning. There's one more layer to this. When we stop seeing items as mine and start seeing them as meant to be passed on, we no longer hold them with tight fists. We hold them with open hands. That shift, that one gentle shift, can unlock rooms that have been emotionally closed for decades. And if you're wondering where to begin, start small. Look around. One object, one item you haven't touched in a year but still carries a whisper of usefulness. Ask yourself, who could use this today? Then let your imagination do the heavy lifting. You don't need to solve it perfectly. Just trust that the right hands will show up when you release your grip. And remember, the person receiving doesn't need to know your story to benefit from it. The act itself carries enough love. Now, if that stirred something in you, stay with me, because in the next part, we'll explore a surprisingly gentle way to say goodbye, one that doesn't require words at all, just one photo, one click, in a whole new kind of closure. There's a certain kind of silence in a house at 3 p.m. when the sun falls just right across the carpet and you catch your reflection in a hallway mirror. You pause, not to fix your hair, but because something about your eyes feels familiar, yet different. Not quite the woman you were, not yet the one you're becoming, just in between. That's when the mirror whispers a question no closet organizer ever asks. Does this still reflect who you are now? The two-way mirror test is simple, but powerful. When you're holding something, an old dress, a dusty vase, a stack of books, you ask yourself two questions, like looking into both sides of a mirror. If this item could see me now, would it still feel at home in my life? And when I look at it, do I feel reflected or stuck? It's not about what the item meant in 1982. It's about what it means today. Let me tell you about Denise from Portland. She was holding on to her collection of A-line skirts and floral blouses from her church choir days. They hadn't fit for years, but she kept them, saying they reminded her of feeling useful. When we gently held one up to the mirror test, she paused and said, "You know, I don't think these clothes recognize me anymore." We folded each piece with care and donated them to a church thrift shop that helps young women find affordable Sunday outfits. Denise kept just one scarf, the one she wore the day her granddaughter was born. That scarf still smiled back at her from the mirror. I remember my own mirror test moment. It wasn't clothing. It was an old harmonica my father gave me. I hadn't played in years. I picked it up one afternoon, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and realized I was holding on to a version of myself that needed to grieve, and I had already done that. I placed it in a velvet pouch, wrote a note, and gifted it to a boy in our block who loved blues music. A week later, I heard him playing on his porch. Sometimes the reflection we need isn't in the glass. It's in how gently we release what no longer sees us. What makes this test so gentle yet effective is that it doesn't demand logic. It doesn't ask, "Do I need this?" It asks, "Does this still know me?" And if not, maybe it's time for both of you to part ways with love. Some of the women I've worked with use this test as a little ritual. They stand in front of their hall mirror, hold one item at a time, and listen. Not with their ears, but with their hearts. You'd be surprised how clearly the answer comes when you're not forcing it. The mirror won't lie. It knows when we've outgrown something quietly. It also knows when we're clinging to items as placeholders for emotions we haven't spoken aloud. And here's the beautiful part. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about honoring who you are now. This version of you deserves a home that fits her, not just physically, but emotionally. A home that says, "I see you just as you are." As we shift to the final step, one that brings closure, not just decisions, I want you to keep that mirror feeling close, the honesty, the stillness, because what we're going to talk about next, it's not about organizing. It's about gratitude, goodbye, and the art of letting go without losing yourself. There's a certain drawer in almost every home. You know the one, tucked away, not because it's useful, but because it's full of things too nice to throw out. Candles you never lit, scarves still with tags, that bird-shaped soap dish from your niece's wedding in 2009, and you keep them, not because you love them, but because someone gave them to you. Gift guilt is quiet, but heavy. It whispers, "You'll hurt someone's feelings. You should be grateful. What if they ask about it?" But here's the truth no one tells us. A gift has already served its purpose the moment it was given. Its job was to express love, not to become a life sentence on your shelf. One woman I worked with, Marla in Tennessee, had 3 full bins in her hallway closet labeled "Gifts from Others." I kid you not, one of them held a bread machine she never opened, and she's been gluten-free for 6 years. She said, "I feel like I owe these gifts a home because someone thought of me." I gently said, "You do owe them something, a thank you, and then freedom." We took one afternoon, wrote short notes or whispered a quiet thank you out loud, and boxed them for a church sale. That closet is now her linen nook, with fresh towels and a lavender diffuser she actually enjoys. I remember something similar in my own home, a ceramic eagle statue my cousin gave me during my retirement party. It sat for 5 years on top of my bookshelf, staring at me like it was waiting for approval. I didn't even like it. One day, I wrapped it in a kitchen towel, drove it to Goodwill, and whispered, "Thank you for celebrating me. Now go find someone who'll love you back." And would you believe it? When I came back home, I actually felt taller. A gift is a gesture, not an anchor. If you're holding on to things out of obligation, not joy, you're not honoring the giver. You're just crowding your own peace. Some women I know create a ritual for releasing these gifts. They lay the item out gently, light a small candle, and say one sentence: "This was given in love. I now release it in love." Then they place it in a donation bag, not as a rejection, but as a continuation of generosity. That act of grace brings more healing than any storage bin ever could. What if we reframed the guilt? What if letting go isn't betrayal, but trust? Trust that the relationship is strong enough without the candle holder. Trust that the love remains, even if the item moves on. You are not a bad daughter or sister or friend for releasing what doesn't fit your life anymore. You're just making space for air, for light, for the kind of gifts that don't collect dust, peace, ease, and room to breathe. And you know what? That perfectly good sweater you never wore might become someone else's favorite thing this winter, but only if you let it go. As we wrap up this final step, take a moment, not for sorting, but for forgiving yourself for the pressure, the guilt, the years you spent trying to keep everything just in case or just because. Because next, we're not decluttering at all. We're honoring, closing, and learning how to say goodbye with both hands open. Some women clean because it needs to be done. Others clean because they're ready for something to begin. What if after all the sorting, bagging, donating, you didn't rush to rearrange the space you've just cleared? What if you simply sat? Ruth, a retired nurse from Indiana, told me how she finally cleared her kitchen window ledge, once cluttered with old pill bottles, expired coupons, and cracked planters. She didn't replace them. She made tea, pulled up a chair, and just sat in that silence as the morning sun touched her face. It was the first time in months she cried, not from grief, but from the relief of stillness. I remember doing the same thing in my garage, of all places. After hauling out 2 carloads to the church sale, I stood where the shelves used to be. Empty. Quiet. The space echoed, and strangely, it felt holy, like I was finally giving my life back to myself, square foot by square foot, because we often spend years tending to others, children, spouses, church groups, school bake sales. The house fills with their voices, their things, and when it gets quiet again, we're left wondering who we are without all that. Clearing clutter isn't about what goes, it's about what finally has room to arrive. So before you grab a storage bin or buy that new side table from Walmart, give the space a moment to speak. Let it breathe. Let you breathe. And when you're ready, we'll talk about saying goodbye, not as a loss, but as a quiet, loving ceremony. In every home I've helped clear, there's always one drawer, one box, one corner, where letting go feels like betrayal. Not because the item is worth much, but because it holds something we can't touch, the memory of who we once were or who we loved. That's why I always recommend creating a small letting go ritual. Simple things: light a candle before donating old books to the library. Say a quiet thank you to the jacket your husband wore every Sunday. Or write a note and slip it into that last box of Christmas ornaments heading to Goodwill. Gloria, a widow in Vermont, made a farewell tea the day she cleared her guest room. She placed her mother's china cup on the empty nightstand and whispered, "Thank you for all the holidays." Then she packed the china set, knowing someone else would cherish it next. I once sang a hymn, "Abide with Me," while loading my father's tools into the back of my car. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift, like love had been released from the wood and metal and returned to me in silence. Sometimes we're not holding on to things. We're holding on to how it felt to be loved. So end your decluttering not with a chore, but with a blessing. Let each goodbye carry peace, not guilt. And if you're wondering where to begin, start small. One photo, one sweater, one goodbye, whispered out loud. Because the point of all this isn't just to make space on your shelves, it's to make room in your spirit for what still lies ahead.